And welcome back to another edition of the Elura Code Podcast. My guest today is Michelle Multidimensional. I think that name speaks for itself. She is the creator of she has a Akashic Record certification process in which she is guiding people through and teaching them how to access and use the Akashic Records for many aspects of spiritual growth, from deeper knowledge and wisdom to healing, and also learning to connect with other versions of themselves, visions, really just about any connecting to higher densities, different bodies of information, downloads, and really any other sorts of aspects that you can associate with this journey that can be done via the Akashic Records. So without further ado, Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to get chatting with you. We always have such deep conversations.
We do indeed, and it's honestly it's the main driver why I decided to actually add this aspect to the to this project that I'm doing, just because I want to bring as many wonderful souls along with me as I can. And we had connected in such an organic way. And I really enjoyed the program that I was a part of. And well, anyway, long story short, here we are.
Yeah. Can I talk a little bit about the certification?
I was just gonna say, actually,
okay.
Let's just start off by you telling us what you're up to. Tell us about this certification and this school that you've started, and take it from there.
Beautiful. So yeah, just to kind of clarify, I run the Quantum Akashic Practitioner certification program through the Academy of Sacred Leadership, and basically help other psychics and healers up-level the fuck out of their life and their business through Akashic Records work. So that's really the gist of it. And I also do a lot of identity shifting work. And I do have a spring business accelerator that I'm enrolling for right now. So psychic development combined with business mentorship is my wheelhouse.
Okay. And how did you, well, obviously the psychic aspect is, it's just something that you're born with, but, say over the last few years, how did that sort of progress into what you've got now?
It's a long journey, but really, I guess I've always known that I was meant to have my own business. I went to school for business management originally. I tried and failed a number of times actually throughout my life to start businesses. And that's the best way that we learn as entrepreneurs. Sometimes it doesn't always go right the first time that we try, right? And so now here I am, and I finally am in this season of like growth and expansion. And I know what has worked for me. And and I just want to pass along that wisdom and that knowledge to other people. And for me, so the Akashic Records is actually how I had my spiritual awakening in 2013. I didn't know it at the time, but I went through a Kundalini awakening. And when that happened, there were many different aspects of that, but part of that was I had strong visions for 48 hours straight. Basically, my whole nervous system got activated. My crown chakra got blown open. All of a sudden, I was completely tuned into my psychic senses. I had not ever explored them before. So this was like a very spontaneous Kundalini awakening, and really kind of wrecked my nervous system. Honestly, it took me about 3 years to get my body back into a grounded place, because my channel was blown wide open and I was communicating with angels and I was communicating with aliens, and I was, having all of these higher dimensional beings that I was in conversation with. And I sounded like a crazy person to the people in my life at the time. But what I realized was, in that initial spontaneous awakening, when I had those 48 hours of strong visions, I was in the Akashic Records. So my awakening began in the Akashic Records, and it took me some time, quite some time to realize that that's where I was in the field that I was pulling information from. And I kind of explored the Akashic Records on and off throughout that decade from like 2013 to like 2023. But then I essentially had this dream where I was given direction, not like word for word, but the dream was this being came to visit me in my dream. And they said, repeat this mantra. They were like, as my consciousness expands, I reshape my reality. And so I started, and in the dream, I was saying that over and over. And then as I woke up that day, I was saying that over and over. And that night, as I was getting into the bath, I had this vision of me picking up this book that I had, which was on the Akashic Records. And I was like, okay. So I went and grabbed the book and I brought it into the bath with me and I read it from front to back, the whole thing. And I decided that day that I was going to start a devoted practice in the Akashic Records. And that night I did, and everything in my life transformed. So the reason why I like working with the Akashic Records and why I've woven that into business support and expansion is because it is how, for me, it was the missing piece. And everyone is different and everyone's key is going to be different, right? For me, it was the key, the missing key that really got me to where I had been trying to get to for so long, because it's a frequency. So it's frequency medicine. And oftentimes that is what's required to help us align with what it is that we're creating. It's an attunement. Like it's not about time. It's about frequency. So how long does it take you to get on the frequency of what it is that you're calling in, right? That's how long it takes. So when you work in the records on a daily basis, you're essentially fine tuning yourself like an instrument to the frequency that the version of you who is excelling and, expanding and in abundance is already living at. And that's why I feel like it's such a good partner for business expansion. And yeah, I mean, my whole life, if I would tell you 2024, mid 2024, it's 2026 now, spring. This time in 2024, I was driving for Lyft and DoorDash. And I was doing my business on the side, but like the bulk of my money at that time was coming in through Lyft driving. And I was miserable because I was driving so much and I was so exhausted. And yeah, I mean, there to now, it's a kind of a short period of time to have made all the progress that I finally made. So that's why.
Okay, well, I mean, that's a pretty good reason why.
Yeah.
And you didn't mention the was there a pivotal moment, or was it just a gradual rolling into what you're doing, or was there an event that really kind of like made a big difference?
So great question. So in July of last year, I was still halfway in between worlds.
Okay.
And I will tell you that being in between for me was torturous. It was
horrible.
It was awful. I was not having a good time. And so however, I was already in a place of progress. Okay. So in June of 2025, I launched, actually it was in May when I started enrolling. Are you still there? Because you disappeared. Okay. So I launched a program called Heal in the Akash. So from all of my personal Akashic studies, right, I basically received direction from my guides once I got to the end of what my commitment was. Mm-hmm. They were like, okay, now we want you to run a program. They gave me the instructions for what I was to do. So they told me, okay, we want you to run this program called Heal in the Akash. This program is just about healing with the Akashic frequency. So I was just guiding a group of people into the Akashic Records. It was a 2-month program. Mm-hmm. And we simply went into the records to heal. And that was the whole intention. And so did that, ran that program. I was running that program in July of last year, but I was also still driving for Lyft, like a little bit here and there. But there was this one period of time where things were really tight for me financially all of a sudden again. Like I had gone into a contraction and I had to drive like 10 days in a row for like 10 hours or something fucking insane. But I was also running this Akashic stuff. So it was kind of like these two energies were just like competing with each other. And it had brought me to this internal boiling point. And I just broke the fuck down. And I just had the most intense soul cry of my whole life. Like I went into the Akashic Records and essentially threw a temper tantrum. But it wasn't like I swear I could not control what was coming out of my body. I have not had that kind of an actual breakdown in my life. And so and it was like a 2-hour thing too. It was like, it was like SO fucking S, like help. And so after that happened, I sat in silence in my room for 2 hours, just sitting on the ground, staring at the wall. Cause I was like, that was so intense. And then, I was like in my room sitting and I like opened my phone up and I was on TikTok. Every single message on my TikTok was like from like a galactic, they were like, this is the Galactic Alliance. Like, we have heard your cries. Like we have, and it was like word for word, some of the stuff that I had just prayed about. And it was like, they were literally sending me these messages. And I was like, oh my God. And every single video on my TikTok feed for the whole time I was scrolling was aliens. And that had never happened to me before. I don't get that kind of content on TikTok, unfortunately, normally. They like block it. So I felt like my messages were received. After that moment in July, that is when things actually really started shifting for me. I just basically started living from the higher version of myself and started making more choices from that version of myself. Like I felt like I could actually tune into her. And then I started working with my coach in October. Like I made this wild decision to just make this huge investment of money that I really didn't have. And then I made it back in 2 weeks. And things just started moving and flowing and rocking and rolling from there. And I think really what it's all about is getting to a place where we're able to start really shift the vibration of the decisions that we're making. Because we talk a lot about like embodying your higher self, right? But it's like, what that really means is that you're making choices from that version of you. So that's what's actually going to move you into that new timeline. And yeah, and then the downloads just started coming around once I installed the identity of a leader, because that's what I had been missing too. I was like, yeah, I'm a psychic and like, yeah, like I help other psychics, but I wasn't necessarily seeing myself as a leader. So when I really downloaded and installed the identity of a leader, what I did was I transformed my Heal in the Akash program into a certification, right? And I also started a school. I was doing something kind of similar, but I saw it through a new lens. It was like I had a new perspective on what I was actually doing and teaching. And that's how everything came to be. But it was that internal shift of perception of how I saw myself that allowed me to create what I have created. Like I really didn't even change that much. It's like almost the same thing, but just packaged differently. And that is the bread and butter of my business now. And now I'm also like moving into a phase next year where I'm going to be hiring teachers. I already have one teacher coming through the program now, and then I have 2 more that want to also come through to be teachers. So I have 3 people that are going to be part of the academy already. And yeah, and so that's really exciting. And, part of my vision for the academy is to set a global standard for psychic education, because the other thing that I was realizing is that there wasn't like a board, because I wanted to run the certification like in a very professional way and have it board certified and all of that. But there wasn't really a board for psychic education that I could find that I wanted to be a part of. I was like looking, there were a lot of like hypnotherapy boards and like there's lots of boards, but there was no psychic education board. And so I started one. I have the International Board of Akashic Practitioners now too, which I already have a VP for, and she's, you know, got her PhD. She's in academic land. Yeah. So it's all, but you know what? The key is that internal perception shift. It's your identity. That's why everyone's talking about identity right now. It's very hot in the field.
Identity is
everyone's talking about it
everywhere. I remember listening to an audio probably 15 years ago. It was a Tony Robbins audio, and it was like him going on for 40 minutes about identity.
Well, but it's the deepest layer of the psyche.
Well, it's the deepest layer of the
onion.
So since we're on this topic, I think there's a huge portion of the identity that is not even realized because it's internal. And let's face it, 99% of the people out there are externally focused completely. I mean, you might have the odd person who does a bit of mindfulness and might pay attention to if they got a sore foot or something, but generally speaking, identity is very much an externally driven concept, embodied type of exposure. So, for example, I was actually listening to an audio about this last night, where you're identified with literally anything and everything that from a it could be a realistic perspective, like, for example, the work that you do, or the accolades that you've achieved, your education, the various different roles, and that can be like proper roles, like a parent or a teacher or a doctor or whatever. But it can also be more morality based roles, kind of like, oh, I'm a good person, or I'm reliable, I'm dependable, like all these things, right? And I think it's important for people to understand, and this is where your work comes in, is that that is really, it's just like a tiny, because the majority of who we are is not, it's not conceptual, and it's not, you know what I mean? It's much more of an energetic base.
Yeah, we're multidimensional, right?
Yeah.
But so like the identity works, so internally, who we believe ourselves to be is what we create externally, right? Yeah. But there's so many different layers at play. And what actually helps us to expand into more multidimensionality. So here's the other part. If you are basing your identity externally, if you are saying, oh, I'm this because this, what you're actually doing is you're not a sovereign creator, you're running on like the past. So all of your past experiences what you're seeing now is already a relic of the past. Everything that you're seeing right now in this moment is something that has already been created. It's a result of thinking patterns, mind patterns of the past. So the same thing with identity. So if you're basing who you are based on what you see, then all you're doing is looping a program. And for some people, that's fine. They're like, I'm happy with my life. Great. If you're happy with your life, that's amazing. But if you're in a space of wanting to grow and become like fulfill your own highest potential, then that shift has to come from inside. And so when you start changing who you perceive yourself to be internally, that's when you activate the archetype of the sovereign creator. And that's when you start to actually consciously create your life. And yes, it does take some quote unquote time for things to start showing up in the 3D. But that shift happens inside, and that's what makes everything else start to unfold. Now, when we're working with multidimensional layers, I was just teaching about this my QAP students last night, but like, as we consciously evolve, part of ascension is we are expanding our awareness into different layers of reality. And that is happening through a process of our own consciousness. So the quality of our consciousness determines where we're pulling information from, what levels and what dimensions we have access to. And the Akashic frequency works directly with the level of consciousness. So for me, as I start working with the Akashic Records, on a personal level, it expands your consciousness so that you can kind of touch these other layers of self. And, the ideas that I got around what to transform my program into and all of that, there was a level of that identity installation happening, but it was also a conversation with my higher self in this higher dimension. I'm now pulling information down from maybe my 12th dimensional avatar self, having moments where I'm actually connecting into God, like I'm plugging directly in. And so that, it's kind of a combination of, that's why I think the identity work with the frequency work is so crucial, because it's a combination of that really results in the big changes.
Well, I would even go as far as to say that the identity work is frequency work, because it's literally all energy based, and it's I guess it's, first of all, understanding. I mean, because most people don't understand this concept of multidimensionality and what it actually is, even from like a day-to-day level. Like, because if you look, if you look at a person's personality, and you were like to psychoanalyze them or something, just from like the psychological standpoint, because that's really the expression of, on a day-to-day basis, you would notice that there are many things where people are very, they're very grounded, they're very tuned in. But then there's also going to be, another amount of levels where the expression is a lot more simplistic, and it's a lot more kind of midbrain driven. So the expression is not going through that prefrontal cortex lens, where we get into that executive aspect of our hardware. And basically what it this is where you get very skewed views about issues, just purely based on the rose-colored glass effect and these types of things. So and it then ties into the aspect of the current. You know what I mean by current? The current that we're running through our field, and as kind of an effect kind of expression, as opposed to a causal based expression. So that's basically the difference between being embodied in your own leadership versus just and there's nothing wrong with being a follower, because that, for many people, that's their mission, but it's completely being at effect all the time. Or
I think also what you're kind of describing a little bit is like, tell me if I'm not catching this correctly, but there are protective patterns of our ego.
Yeah. So what I'm getting at, basically,
you get stuck there. So like, that's the thing. So the goal really is to bring in more source energy and connect to God more, and be able to recognize when you're in ego and say, this is my small mind. Some people identify with the ego stories as who they are.
Well, this is what I was getting at before. Right. It was like 99% of people identify with that external perception of all these things, right? Like, I'm a good person, I'm a bad person, I'm a this, I'm a that. The worry, the anxiety, the judgment, the hostility. I mean, look, we got another freaking war going on, because people gotta, right?
Yeah.
And this is all, this is all based on ego. And the more that you do this work, the more that you're, I'm also of the, I have convinced myself, and you could call me crazy, but well, people do, and it's kind of fun. But I actually think that these things are timed, not in a linear fashion, obviously, but it's more in an exposure kind of expression fashion. And so, because the stuff's already coded in us, it's coded at birth. And we run a pattern of an expression, or like a version of an expression that's there. Whereas, so for example, I like to use human design in the work that I do, and it's very easy, because there's the blueprint right in front of you, right? It gives all your coding, and this is the ideal, this is like the crystalline version that you get at birth. And there are those patterns. You've got this gate, and this is the I don't want to say negative, because it's not inherently, it's not bad per se.
I would say just distorted.
Yeah, that's a better word. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. But then when you understand that both it's dualistic in nature, and that other right, so it's then this process of the transmutation of the energy. So now we're starting to run a coherent signal, so that we can start to, well, first of all, allow our what's coded innately in our DNA to activate, because once it activates, that's when it starts to run as a more coherent pattern, and that's when it starts to we start to embody it. So it's already there. It's just a question of consciously tapping into it, understanding that you have to be in it in order, well, yeah, I know exactly.
This is exactly what the Keylontic sciences teach about, and the MCEO teachings, which is the Melchizedek Cloister Emerald Order teachings. They talk in the freedom teachings. So this whole body of knowledge is like about what ascension actually is. And a large part of ascension is, number one, restoring our original divine templates, which is what you're talking about. This is our source code. Number two is like activating dormant strands of our DNA. Okay. And the way that we do this is by connecting into the stream of consciousness, which is source, and inviting our 12D avatar self down. So it's a whole process. And in those teachings, they also explain that the path of ascension by nature is a path of exiting reincarnation cycles on Earth. And so if you are in a spiritual awakening process, what is actually happening is that you are in spirit guide training. So like you are like going to become a spirit guide. Like you're on a path of exiting out of like the human physical incarnation, right? Like you're ascending, which means like you become a spirit guide, then you become like whatever the pathway is, but like you're not. So they say that you're actually on a path of becoming an ascended master. Like ultimately. Now how long that takes, I don't know. But this is, and so when we connect into our 12D avatar self, we're connecting into that version of ourself that is like pretty much almost fully ascended, because the 12th dimension is the, and so yeah, this process that you're describing is that. And another tool that I have found that's really useful for activating those energies and those streams of consciousness is like the Maharic shield, which is also from the Keylontic sciences. So yeah.
Wow. So I've never heard it explained quite like that, because a lot of the work that I've done is based on sort of ancient mysticism. And there's been there's been one where I've gotten to, fairly high levels in the training. And but what's really interesting with a lot of these ancient traditions, especially those done through secret societies and stuff like that, are like they teach you all the all the all the theory and the practices and all this, and a lot of it's done through allegory. So it's
Mhm.
done through stories, it's done through exercises, it's done through having your own practice, initiations, all this kind of stuff. A huge use of symbolism.
Mhm.
Um, but when you get to the higher levels, and they drop little hints of this, it's it's woven through, when you start when you start in the very beginning, and higher, and it's not unique to just to the one path that I took, but it's woven in through many other traditions. And that which is, there's this narrative of being selfless, which is which ties into humility, which is a great thing.
Mhm.
But when it gets to the higher, like to the last couple of levels, they really start to talk about, I mean, at this point they're already talking, you're already well endowed with psychic projection, and um, in and frequency collaborating, and all these wild kinds of things. But this is really where they hammer home the creating this etheric identity of being a part of the tradition, as opposed to, so 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 you have to be very careful when, and that's about as far as I got, because once I saw once I was able to actually see what it was finally setting up for, I was still able to do the work, but I was able to rework the exercises to, to take it to where I wanted to go, as opposed to, you know, kind of being part of this. Um, and basically what the end goal for them is to have you be stay a member of the organization, both physically and otherwise,
Mhm.
because that's the way you're being trained. You're being trained you're being trained to serve, which is
Mm.
fine, but it's being done in a way that really inhibits sovereignty,
Mm.
right?
Interesting. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. There's a lot of
So
that going on.
yeah, and I mean, this is stuff that's been around for, um, like, really since Atlantis. I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's come through the chain of command, and so yeah, so it's I mean, that's been my experience with it. And so,
Mhm.
when you get to that point, this is really where, and I think this is where the work, what you're doing, comes in, and is, in my opinion, absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
Is that because I just find a lot of the work that people are doing, people can only do the work to the limit or the extent that they've actually evolved,
Mhm.
because you can't embody something that you've never experienced, right?
Yeah, and I think that's why it took me so long to finally experience where I'm at now. Um, because we do have to go through strong initiations and strong dark nights of the soul to be able to embody. It's carving the depth of being to hold the container. If I'm going to be holding a class with 100 or 1,000 people, or speaking on a stage in front of 1,000 people, I need to have the depth of being to be able to hold that in my system, right? On a continuous basis
And
and show up.
yeah, and let's quantify that, and is because it's holding, and we're literally talking about holding a signal that
Mhm.
is, at that point, will be so,
That's what it is.
I don't want to,
Stabilizing frequency.
it's going to be very information dense. It's not going to be, physically dense because
Mm-hmm.
you're way above the third dimension. You basically surpassed it at that moment. But it's going to be information dense because of all this information that your system has embodied, because you have
Mm-hmm.
to be a certain version in order for that information to really land and for it to actually resonate for people, where they're actually going to feel it internally, and they're actually going to have a real shift. It may just be momentary, but they'll actually be able to experience it,
Mm-hmm.
when they're in the room. And this is the same on, when you're making your content, because it's not just about the words.
That's totally so true. You know what? The clients that I have right now, it's like, so one of the things that's just like so interesting is that people, the moment they say yes to the container, like that's when things just start shifting.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yes, I am helping you to install new identity. I do lots of different subconscious work. Another piece of what I offer, by the way, is parts work. Parts work is huge because parts work works with the protective patterns of the ego. So when we get into the protective patterns of the ego, we get into the parts work, then we're able to, and I also combine that with the Akashic Records work. So we're increasing source consciousness, higher self energy. We're releasing attachment to the protective patterns of the ego. We're getting into those parts where we're helping them unburden, right? Release the pain that they've been carrying so that we can, what they say in parts work is return to true self energy, which is higher self energy. Pretty much every single healing modality is a path to wholeness. It's a path back to true self, which is that internal connection to God.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah.
well, really, I mean, it's just the connection to yourself, because
Yes, you
because
are
we
that because you are source.
because we have, there's three main foundational energies that are in our body. There's the actual life force, which is the animating presence,
Mhm,
and then there's the soul, and then there's source. So
mhm,
it's one energy, but it's not.
mhm.
It's three distinct aspects within a container
I
of.
will say though, increasing your higher self energy increases the other energies.
Well, of
If you want to
course.
just focus on one, that one will enliven your life force. You can, work with when we're healing physical ailments within our body, that is an internal process that is happening. We are healing ourselves through our life force, right? And our life force is strengthened by God.
Yeah, by having a deeper connection with source.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, and like you said, I mean, this is kind of this is at the core with what I'm doing as well. So now the work that I'm doing is still much more. um, I'm definitely in more of a refinement phase, um, but certainly, the work that I have done with people, it's been very promising, and obviously I use it on myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I am a living testament to, to the fact that this type of work does actually, it has huge merits. So
Mm-hmm.
here's a question that's just popped up. So in my training, so to speak, when I had initially learned about manifesting, the kind of the and I'd be curious to get your 2 cents on this, was, the basic, it's basically a basic 2-step process. Define your dream, and that can get as ridiculously detailed as possible,
Mm-hmm.
and then get a burning desire for its achievement.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so it's that burning desire, or that obsession. Now, not an unhealthy obsession where
Yeah.
you're not eating and you're, because blah blah blah, but you're very single-minded. For you, for example, right now, you have an omnipotent desire or obsession with creating
Mm-hmm.
this world that you're creating. So
Yeah. But it's so it's not a choice for me. It's just in me.
Yeah.
And I think that when you recognize that you have so the first part of life is like figuring out what is my purpose. Like what is the purpose that drives me, right? And like it's different. It can be different things for everyone. I'm not saying like it has to be a soul mission type style thing, but that connection to purpose, when you finally find that, whatever that is for you, it becomes the most important thing. Like, I am here to do this thing. For some people, that could be like being a mother. Like, it doesn't have to be owning a business. But for me, it was recognizing I have a soul mission. That moment of recognition, like, holy shit, like I actually incarnated, like I soul contracts, soul mission, like I have a mission. And when you are somebody that has that, the first part is you feel this. First of all, the jobs that you work just never work out. There's some reason why shit just keeps falling apart. You can't stay stable. You're constantly like, because you're here to do something. And until you get really real and figure out what that thing is, the first part of your spiritual awakening is like finding that thing. And then you find that thing and you're like, oh my God, I found the thing. And then, you start doing the thing. Sometimes that thing can evolve slightly, but generally, I'm here to be a healer. I'm here to help people with some type of spiritual healing work, right? And there's a lot of light workers activating right now, and we need each other more than ever. I think right now is a season of light workers helping light workers, because what is actually going on a collective consciousness level is that, and I heard it described this way, and this was actually a channeled message from my guides in the Akashic Records, was that human consciousness is like, and I don't mean ice as in but it's like ice in the sense of the molecular structure of ice. I feel weird saying that word with everything going on. But basically, when ice freezes, it doesn't freeze molecule by molecule, reaches a critical threshold, and the entire thing freezes at once. And they were showing me how human consciousness is similar in that it's not like the shift in consciousness that it's not happening person by person. What's happening is like, once we do wake up, a critical number of us shift into that higher vibration, the entire collective consciousness then wakes up. Mm-hmm. And so for light workers right now, it's very essential that we all come online, because there's a very specific number of us that are here. And each person is equally important, because we are the ones that will shift literally the consciousness of the collective. So for me, Akashic Records work feels like the most important thing I could be doing, because that's how we're shifting at the level of consciousness. That's the frequency that we're getting into, where we're actually making those changes at the level of consciousness and focusing on what we actually want to create and see in the world, because we create via our consciousness. So we need to take our attention off of war, scarcity, all of this crazy stuff that they're feeding us, that they're trying to get us to manifest, and start focusing our energy more on New Earth and visualizing what we want to create and see. And so that's another sort of level and layer of like becoming a sovereign creator and realizing the power of your own consciousness and thinking. But yeah, like, so coming into your purpose, I think for people that are light workers, it's this recognition, like I am a light worker, like I'm here to uplift or shift the collective in some sort of positive way. And until we like really acknowledge that and own that, right? Like a lot of people get stuck in the, I don't want to quit my corporate job, or like they kind of halfway in, halfway out. And that process is one that I tend to walk people through, because I myself went through it. So when you have the frequency, you hold the codes for the transformations that you yourself have been through. Mm-hmm. And in 2023, I quit my job with no backup plan, which was an insane thing to do. But literally, I was in the bath and I started channeling. The Council of the Nine came through and they were telling me activation of my soul mission was imminent. They gave me strong directions to quit my job, like even gave me a date, which never happens. Beings don't work in time, so they gave me a date I needed to leave my job by. And I was like, I'm not going to disobey the freaking Galactic Council. So I did it. But yeah, I sat to an average person. I saw them and saying like, I quit my job because aliens told me to, but that's actually how it happened.
Well, it's
get it. Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I totally get it. And yeah, because if you look at it from a perspective of quantum physics, it's just a mass expansion of quantum entanglement, because, you know, through people that you're connected to or things you see online, you know, it sparks something, and then it resonates, and then it expands. And so if for example, if you understand, you know, the basic mechanics of law of attraction and how it actually works, you know, this all makes sense, is because quantum entanglement is just as far as I'm concerned, is just a byproduct of these continual activations. And it gets to a critical mass where, like you said, everything, you know, because everything is layered. Everything works the same. It doesn't matter, you know, whether it's, you know, the tiniest. I mean, let's face it, particles aren't even particles. They're very tiny microscopic vortexes that, you know, because, you know, you go into an atom and you realize that it's still 99% empty space. So it's really just space that we're working with. And when you understand that, you know, because that's where that field resides. And I just completely forgot where I was going with this.
That's okay. I'm getting a thought stream around this.
Okay,
so I was just teaching about the first dimension yesterday in IP. So we're doing our multidimensional awareness module where I go through, you know, dimensions 1 through 15. And